The observation deck of the research station Kepler's Promise hummed with its usual symphony of environmental controls, but Orla barely noticed. She stood at the reinforced viewport, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt, a patchwork of faded blues and greens that had traveled 47 light-years from Earth. Below, the copper-tinted forests of Threshold 9 swayed in the planet's perpetual twilight. "You're going to wear a hole in that glass," Lewis said, approaching with 2 steaming cups. The scent of synthetic coffee filled the air between them. Orla accepted the cup without looking away. "The Venari cubs are late. They're always at the clearing by now." Lewis checked his datapad. Maybe the pack moved on. The behavioral algorithms predicted they'd migrate south this week. No. Orla's breath fogged the viewport. Something's different. The Venari had fascinated xenobiologists since first contact 3 years ago. Standing nearly 2 meters tall with 4 legs and 2 manipulator limbs, their chitinous exoskeletons shimmered like oil on water. They communicated through bioluminescent patterns that rippled across their bodies, a language humanity was only beginning to understand. What made them remarkable wasn't their intelligence, which rivaled Earth's great apes, but their social structure. Venari cubs stayed with their birth pack for only 6 months before being abandoned to survive alone until maturity. It was brutal efficiency, and it haunted Orla every time she watched it happen. A flash of movement caught her eye. 3 cubs, no larger than terrestrial wolves, emerged from the tree line. Their shells hadn't yet hardened to adult opacity. They glowed faintly with nervous amber pulses. "They're back," Orla whispered. Lewis moved beside her. "And they're alone. The adults really left them." The cubs moved with the jerky uncertainty of the recently abandoned. The largest one, Orla had privately named it Compass, kept stopping to flash patterns toward the forest, calling for parents who would never answer. "I hate this part," Orla said quietly. "It's nature, their nature. Doesn't mean I have to like it." She pulled her grandmother's quilt tighter. The heating system worked perfectly, but cold wasn't always about temperature. Her grandmother had wrapped her in the same quilt during thunderstorms, after bad dreams, when the world felt too big and frightening. Now Gran was gone, and Orla was 47 light-years from anyone who remembered those storms. The observation shift ended at 2200 hours. Orla secured her quilt on a wall hook, standard procedure before entering the decontamination zone, and began the process of suiting up for exterior sample collection. The quilt stayed behind, a splash of earth colors against the station's sterile white walls. She didn't see it slip from the hook, didn't notice it fall into the waste reclamation chute that would process it through the exterior disposal system. By the time alarms should have triggered, a system glitch had already marked the event as logged and cleared. The quilt tumbled through the processing tubes and landed in the organic waste pile, 50 meters from the station's south wall. 3 hours later, Compass discovered it. The cub had been investigating the human structure, drawn by curiosity and the faint warmth that radiated from its walls. The pile of waste materials included mostly plant matter the humans had collected and analyzed. Nothing interesting. But then a new scent. Different. Complex. Organic but not plant, not animal. Not Venari. Compass pulled at the fabric. It was soft in a way Threshold 9's sharp-edged ecosystem could never produce. The cub's chromatophores pulsed confusion, question, interest patterns. The other 2 cubs approached. The smallest, barely half Compass's size, touched the fabric with a manipulator limb and immediately pressed closer. Despite the cold night, the quilt retained warmth. More than warmth. Something else. Something that made the abandoned cubs' shells flash colors they'd forgotten since their pack left. By dawn, all 3 cubs had burrowed beneath the quilt. Orla discovered the theft during the morning check. "Lewis, my quilt is gone." "Check the laundry processor." "I didn't put it in the laundry. It was on the hook." "Right here." They found the system logs. Traced the failure. Watched security footage of the quilt's accidental ejection. "The waste pile," Lewis said. "We can retrieve it. Probably already compressed, but no." Orla had pulled up the exterior cameras. "Look, the 3 cubs lay in a pile, the quilt spread over them like a tent. Their shells pulsed in synchronized patterns, slow, rhythmic waves of deep blue and soft green. The colors of contentment, of safety, of being protected. "That's not possible," Lewis breathed. They're supposed to be solitary now. They shouldn't cluster. And those colors? Juvenile Venari don't display those patterns without adult presence, but they were. 3 abandoned children, wrapped in a grandmother's love, translated across species and stars. For 6 days, Orla watched the cubs return to the quilt each night. They learned to hunt the local fauna. They explored farther each day, but they always came back to that splash of blue and green fabric, crawling beneath it as darkness fell. On the 7th day, Compass carried the quilt into the forest, the other cubs following. Through the drone cameras, Orla watched them integrated into a sleeping den, carefully arranging local materials around it. They're taking it with them, she said. The fabric will degrade in a few months in these conditions. I know. Orla smiled, though her eyes were wet. But it'll last long enough. Long enough for what? For them to remember they don't have to be alone. Lewis pulled up the behavioral data, his expression shifting from skepticism to wonder. The algorithm is updating. This changes the model. If abandoned cubs can form new pack bonds through comfort objects, then their social structure might be more flexible than we thought. Humans do that, Orla said softly. We carry pieces of home with us. We wrap ourselves in memories when we're scared. We share warmth when the universe feels cold. She touched the viewport where the cubs had disappeared into the forest. Maybe we're not so different. Maybe that's what being alive means anywhere in the galaxy, needing to know someone cared, needing something soft in a sharp world. The data kept coming in over the following weeks. The 3 cubs stayed together, defying every prediction. They used the quilt until it finally disintegrated, and by then, they didn't need it anymore. They had each other. And in the research stations across a dozen worlds, xenobiologists began questioning their assumptions about alien nature, human nature, and the universal language of a blanket shared on a cold night. And